What goes on here? Oh, I don't mind your raiding on the lunchbox, but at least you could knock before you come in. All right, wise guy. I'm going to have to ask you to leave.
You startled me. I didn't know anybody else was coming by. But you know what? I'm glad you did. We got a lot to talk about. On this installment of Psych Rad, we will be looking back in time at Bamm Rubble as a case study examining Albert Bandura's social learning theory as it applies to aggressive and violent behavior in children. For those of you who didn't grow up in the Stone Age, or watch any of the anthropological recordings from that period of human existence, Bamm Rubble was the adopted son of Barney and Betty Rubble. Barney and Betty had tried for many years to bear a child through biological means, but to no avail. In an act of desperation, Barney and Betty wished upon a falling star to bring them a child. A short time later, a baby boy was left on their doorstep with a note saying that his name was Bamm and he was an orphan that needed a good home. After some brief deliberation, Barney and Betty decided to adopt Bamm. From the moment that Bamm entered their lives, Barney and Betty observed that the tough little toddler was exhibiting some aggressive and violent behaviors. Barney even tried reasoning with him, but was subsequently assaulted by the little fellow.
Okay. Now, Bamm, you mustn't hit anything with your... Ouch! Hey, let go of my finger!
Despite their authoritative approach to parenting, Bamm's violent and destructive tendencies persisted. Based on the aforementioned case information, it seems safe to surmise that Bamm's aggressive behavior could be the product of what social cognitive psychologist Albert Bandura called modeling. According to Bandura, children model or imitate behaviors that they have learned through observing others. For example, the child who angrily hits a playmate in the same way that he has been punished at home. Based on Bandura's theory, Bamm could be imitating violent behavior that he has witnessed or been subjected to by his parents or other social agents. In assessing this case, my first area of inquiry would probably be whether or not Bamm had previously and or was currently experiencing some form of violence from another or others. While we know nothing of Bamm's biological parents or previous caretakers, other than they were somewhat irresponsible to leave a small child in a basket on a stranger's doorstep with only a short note and a large wooden club, from all outward appearances, Barney and Betty seemed to be nurturing, responsive, and supportive parents, while at the same time setting firm limits in regards to Bamm's behavior. They also seemed to have a healthy marital relationship without much, if any, bickering or volatile interactions with each other. Thus, it seems unlikely that Bamm learned to be violent from Barney or Betty. Other than his mysterious biological parents and his adopted parents Barney and Betty, there is only one other potential influence on young Bamm: the next-door neighbors, Fred and Wilma Flintstone. It is uncertain how much interaction Bamm had with Fred and Wilma preceding the onset of his aggressiveness, but based on historical documentation, we know that their relationship was at times more than a bit tumultuous. On several occasions, Fred was heard threatening Wilma with violence, and, in turn, Wilma was often physically abusive to Fred. If Bamm had been witness to any of those displays of aggression and violence between Fred and Wilma, he may have begun modeling them. However, there is no known documentation that he did in fact witness such displays. It is known that Fred and Barney spent a lot of time together, and that Fred could be quite abusive towards Barney, often belittling him, verbally abusing him, and on some occasions even physically abusing him.
Oh, stay away from me, Fred! Don't hurt me, Fred! I'm not gonna hurt you! Stay away, Fred! Bonnie, darling, light of my life, I'm not gonna hurt you. Stay away, Fred! You didn't let me finish my sentence. I said I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains in. Oh, Fred.
Considering the considerable amount of time that Fred spent around Barney and his family, it seems very probable that Bamm might have been exposed to at least some of the violent altercations between his father and Fred, so perhaps it was the example from which his later behaviors were modeled. Or some might argue that Bamm simply learned his bad behavior from watching too many cartoons. But, regardless, I would advise Barney and Betty to greatly limit Bamm's interactions with Fred Flintstone. and never leave him alone with Fred unsupervised. If it were discovered that in fact Bam Bam had been witness to violent behaviors displayed by another or others, my assessment would most likely be that he was modeling these behaviors as Bandura's social learning theory implies, and I would proceed accordingly. The therapeutic techniques that I would employ in this case would depend on whether or not Bam Bam's aggressive behavior was in fact a product of modeling. For example, if it was learned that his parents were the models for his pugilistic behavior, I would encourage them to modify their own patterns of aggressive behavior in order to provide a more positive model from which Bam Bam could relearn new patterns of behavior of his own. Through positive modeling, he could learn to replace Bam Bamming with hugging or some other form of healthy human interaction or physical contact. I would also encourage his parents to provide positive feedback in the form of praise when he engaged in these new behaviors, and let the sun shine in. I would also like to add if there was any suspicion that Bam Bam's aggressive behavior was being modeled after physical violence inflicted upon him, this of course would raise a red flag and the proper authorities would be promptly notified as mandated by law.